and I think that's brilliant. So.
On the other hand, you can have exciting moments like an AGM of a residents association recently that was hacked by people from China. So,
Well,
Terry, we are live now.
Yeah, thank you for the conversation. Do we have Maurice and Paul present? Karen?
Not yet, Chair. We'll give them a ring and chase them up.
I'll give them 2 minutes and then we'll start without them.
You can start the meeting now, Terry. We'll ring them.
We are quorate, are we?
Yes, we are quorate.
If we're quorate, then we have no reason not to proceed. Thank you very much indeed, colleagues, for attending this meeting, the Community Safety and Waste Panel meeting. I see things coming up. Yes, of course, this is not the way we like to do things, really. I'd much prefer to see you face to face. I'm sure the feeling may well be mutual. But a few announcements, if I can, beforehand. Slightly changes in the way in which we're going to operate. The council has decided that, and I'll read it out to you, due to the pandemic, the council will be holding this meeting electronically, of course, in accordance with the regulations, as it always does. Members of the public may also attend in an electronic capacity, and there's a link to the council website for them to do so. Members of the meeting are asked to keep their microphones switched off until called to speak, and I'll be the one who calls to speak, and to switch their microphones off once they have finished speaking. Cameras may be left on throughout the meeting if members wish. Cameras should be switched on if and when speaking to the meeting. To indicate a wish to speak, members should use the raise hand function and only use the meeting chat function is exclusively for voting. I hope that's clear. So if you want to make a point, please raise your hand and I'll try and pick it up from there. And we'll use chat just purely for voting. At the end of the debate, on each item of the business, there will be a vote, and in some cases just vote for noting, in which case you can say noted rather than vote for or against. I think we have one item on the agenda which actually requires for, against, or abstain, and that is the AFA, the automatic fire alarm motions come before us. There'll be breaks of at least 15 minutes, be held every 2 hours. Other breaks will be incorporated as appropriate. Now, normally this meeting lasts about 2 hours, but I think because the sustainability item on the agenda, it may well go on for 2.5 hours, in which case then we'll go for 2 hours and make a break. If anybody else feels they need a break before then, if they wave their hand and say, Chairman, can we break? I will take that into account. So, thank you very much indeed. There's no membership changes and no apologies for absence. Thank you all for attending. It's a little bit easier attending this way than it is having to rock up in a place, particularly for people, third parties. So that is one plus, I suppose, David, isn't it? Minutes of the last meeting. Confirm the part 1 and part 2 minutes of the meeting held on the 17th of September. Any questions, comments about that? Nothing going down? If we're all content, thank you, we're content. Yeah? I'm not going to ask for a vote on it because nobody's raised a hand on it, because there was part 1 and part 2 as well, wasn't there? Next item is public petitions. We have none. Introduce them, and we have some officers attending here, and I'll introduce them as and when we get round to their item on the agenda. So the first item on the report is an update report from the Police and Crime Commissioner, David Lloyd. And so, David, over to you, and we'll try and run this for 25 minutes if we can.
Okay, Terry, what I'll do is I won't speak for that long then, but I'll do what I do normally. Well, if I do what I do normally, you'll be here till about 11:30, won't you? So I'll try and get through it quickly. You've got a report. I'm not going to insult you by going that line by line through it, but I'm happy to take questions on it if you want to. I suppose it's quite helpful for me just to give you an update of where I think we're at and what my main concerns are at the moment. And in some ways, of course, my concerns are perhaps around the strategic issues rather than specifically around the operational ones. And what's my vision for the next few months and potentially and hopefully years. I think the the big issue we've got at the moment, which I haven't sort of gone long on in my report, but is still a matter of huge concern for me, is how the criminal justice system is working together, and specifically the backlog that we have in the courts. And although that isn't of direct interest in terms of what your roles are as councillors within the room today, I think it's a concern to all of us who are concerned about community safety and criminal justice. And to an extent, where we're at the moment is at that crisis point, because the courts are seeing backlogs now, which may well mean that we're not getting cases into court until 2023. It's not because the court service isn't trying its best. It's because COVID restrictions have meant that a number of courts have had to close because of social distancing. St Albans isn't working at full capacity because of that. And so although those which can be got through quickly are being got through, those complex cases, the most difficult cases, are all sitting in a backlog, which wasn't in a great place, to be honest, before COVID struck, and is now in a far more difficult place. So that is something which really does concern me. Before COVID, we had 654 outstanding trials in the Crown Court. Magistrates actually are back up and running fairly well. We're now at 739 outstanding trials, week ending 25th of October, so significantly up. I would hope that you've only got about 350, 400 trials outstanding for there to be a reasonable hope of getting through them relatively swiftly. And that will have an impact, I fear, in terms of the type of policing we have and the way that we dispose of trials and dispose of criminal justice, because we are likely to see more out of court disposals, as it's called. So people sort of, I suppose, broadly getting a ticket on the street, or broadly having diversionary ways through the criminal justice system. Whilst that might be the right way of doing it, and I'm quite a fan of out of court disposals, I don't like it happening because of pressure from elsewhere in the system. And there is a greater discontinuance of trials, and I really fear that people who especially have had intimate crimes against them, those who had sexual assaults and whatever, may well decide that as the length of time they've got to wait before they get to trial is so long, they may well just decide for themselves not to bring complaint. And my plea, and what I'm really trying hard to do, is to those people to say, we will support you through this whole process. It may be longer, but you do get great support in Hertfordshire through our independent sexual violence advisors, through our Beacon advisory area. We will support you even if it has to take longer, but it's going to be a difficult sell, frankly, and we've got to get this right. So that's my main area of concern at the moment. There are some really good things that have happened, but I could celebrate, but I want to work through some other things. The thing I want to celebrate most of all is the change that I think will be coming to the constabulary in terms of a change of culture around how we approach policing. And it's as big as that. And the chief is really enthusiastic about it, and we're calling it prevention first. And I think this is going to be a public health approach. And I keep saying that the way that this really works is that we ensure it isn't just within the constabulary that we're doing prevention first, but actually we're working together across our collaborations. And I think here, especially around, fire as well, frankly, I think we've got a lot to learn from fire in terms of prevention first. You know how well we have seen house fires, for example, not unfortunately quite disappear, but certainly much fewer than they were, say, in the 70s. And that actually has been because of the agenda that fire has had, the active agenda of prevention first. The constabulary are looking at the same sort of agenda. I think that's going to be really exciting and something that I want to really push. And I think that one of the things that you as councillors and I as PCC can do is to make sure that we get the governance right on this, that we get the right public health approach, and that we work even closer together and ensure that we are sort of joined up in so many ways where we can join up on a voluntary basis, and we just make sure that we can govern correctly, which is why I'm pleased that, for example, as you see in the report, that we've got the first steps of the HQ at Stanborough for both fire and police happening, and that those are really good things because they're symbolic for me about us working more and more closely together. I know you're pressed for time, and I've taken my 10-minute slot of introductory comments because you only want 25 minutes, and I'm sure there'll be quarter of an hour's worth of questions. And if there aren't, you'll be able to get on to even more important issues. You're on mute, Terry.
Thank you, David, and thank you for being succinct. I do appreciate it. There's no rush, though. If we need to go over, we go over. Just need more breaks for us, I suppose, which is helpful. Thank you. Yeah, I got John. I got your message here. I'll ask a couple of questions first, if I can, if that's all right. Yes, we published our report onto the Police and Crime Commissioner that we said we were doing in the minutes of the meeting. So we did that, and all the cabinet panel received that through the minutes of what our thoughts were around the role of the Police and Crime Commissioner. Just mentioning I know that tomorrow we have a meeting about the HSCB, the joint panel between fire and rescue and police, and ambulance services will be there as well. So not much has happened in terms of meetings for a little while, but certainly in terms of events, we are still working very, very closely together, and will continue to do so. And as you mentioned, David, I know that certainly the Chief Fire Officer is operating out of your buildings as well. So I spoke to him yesterday, and he was from Stanborough. So that's always a good sign. That means we are moving in a direction. I think other things are coming up as well as around that collaboration is concerned, like the review of the Jessup, how that's going to operate, that joint partnership for the Emergency Services Training Academy at Stevenage, because COVID may well impact on how we do it and what we do it, and no doubt that comes conversations tomorrow when we have our next meeting. And before I go to those people listed down here, where we stand on the 4 E's, engage, explain, encourage, enforce.
I'm glad you told me which ones they were, because I was first of all trying to work. I always can work out 3 of them. We are the constabulary are very much aware of the need to enforce, but recognise that you don't move straight to enforcement, that you've got to encourage people first and educate them and engage with them. So where we are is that if people do transgress, we are the constabulary are very willing to fine, but first of all they want to make sure that the public health crisis which we are talking about through COVID is seen as a public health crisis and not as a criminal crisis. And so it's important that we engage in the right way. I think that certainly what I've taken from the local member engagement boards, which I attend with leaders of districts and Dave Williams, is that there's a feeling amongst the public that they want greater enforcement, or enforcement to have been better seen through the police. Of course, not all the enforcement is for the police to do, but I have certainly fed that back, and we recognize, or they recognize that it's an operational matter. They recognize that and have no fear that if people transgress, that they will be, we will enforce if we have to.
Thank you. John Hale, please, next.
Thank you, Terry. David, actually not on COVID, but on road policing. The Home Office has just closed a call for evidence with a view to new rules in 2021, and I know that the that large acronym HMICFRS did a inspection, thematic inspection earlier on in the year on it. I wondered what your thoughts were on the current approach in Hertfordshire to policing our roads and what you thought might come out of that review next year.
It's a good question, John. It's a very much operational question, I have to say, and therefore I don't specifically have a response around it, and it's not an area that I have a specialism in. Let me give you what I think would be the, if you like, the political approach that I see, because I think that roads policing, like many other areas of policing, is something where there is what the public understand by it and what those who are engaged in it understand by it. So, for example, when we talk about our roads policing unit, it is a specialist unit which, for the most part, polices those roads which have the fastest traffic on them and which have the most potential for serious collisions. So most of the policing of roads is around motorways, the A1M, the M25, the M1. Those are the ones where disproportionately we find that there is engagement. That which communities are interested in actually is the sort of what I always term as speeding through the village. And that's the bit where I suppose, therefore, my interest is greater, which in many ways is not to do with roads policing, it's to do with community policing. And I will continue, and if I'm around for another 4 years, we'll keep going around the ensuring that we have good community safety schemes, good speed watch schemes, which are part of, and I think you've been involved in them yourself, this process of ensuring that the community feels safe, and where they have a concern, that they can be involved in the solution, and that we can get to a point where, if necessary, there is a camera put in or there is greater enforcement. And I'm sure that you're aware of my road safety fund, which is used really, and we've focused down, we've seen what's worked and what's not worked, and I've focused far more that I want to work alongside all county councillors with it, but the bit that I will fund is the enforcement bit, the bit the public would say, oh yeah, that's the policing bit, and I no longer get close to funding the lumps and bumps and those pieces which strike me as being entirely within the purview of the county council, but that clearly we need to work together on some of those things. The most recently, the Redbourne Road, which is an area that you may well be aware of, others on panel won't, because it's not the Redbourne Road between St Albans and Redbourne, surprisingly, is a place where there was a double fatality not so long ago, and I've approved that we can make sure that we get a mobile speed van in place, which is funded by me. Whether or not that would have meant that tragic incident didn't occur where 2 people died, Potentially not, but there is a real concern from the community that that's a fast road. Let's do something about it. Let's find a way of working together. And if necessary, we'll work up through the process. If there is a real problem there, which can be solved by having average speed cameras, well, let's do that. So your question on my response to the roads policing questionnaire, for want of a better term, is it's not really my area of expertise. That's a specific bit around roads policing units. But if I'm interested in road safety, yes, I am. And the reason I am is that the public are, and that's what they write to me a lot about. And I'm finding ways of ensuring that we have even safer roads, working, as I said at the outset, around collaboration, working in collaboration.
Thank you, David. Tim, I've got you next.
Thank you, Terry. Yeah, my question, I was going to ask a question about the court estate, but David did cover that in his opening comments there and the pressures that's having. My question is going to be a COVID related question and the enforcement by Hertfordshire Police. As we know at the moment, there's many government messages going out, basically sort of highlighting that if we're going to have family Christmases together, then we need to obey the actual rules at the moment under the current lockdown 2 stage. And also probably when it comes to December the 3rd, we may be going back to the tier system. But yes, many areas in Hertfordshire, the rates are going up. I think they might have levelled off in the last week. But yes, that does cause pressures on our hospitals. So I just wonder if David could elaborate on the position of Hertfordshire Police with basically enforcement of the COVID regulations.
I think broadly I've covered it off. And what I'd say, Tim, is I know it's always a frustration, but I'm the elected politician who does the strategy rather than the chief constable who is responsible for the enforcement. How I cover it off, though, is to say that the constabulary are fully aware, as all constabularies across the country are, around their role in helping to ensure that this public health crisis is contained, and that those people who are not community minded sufficiently to ensure that they are not spreading the virus to others are reminded of their responsibilities. Some of that is through education, some of that is through enforcement. They will respond appropriately and are responding appropriately at each level. But by the way, Tim, the public in Hertfordshire has broadly been compliant. We've actually had a very good response. We haven't seen huge issues. Those which we have, I think we have responded to as well as we should. And there are some sort of high profile things like unlicensed music events. I think they're now called instead of raves, but those sorts of things happening where yes, we need to engage. But it is a complex area. It isn't quite as straightforward as it was first thought. We've had to reflect on nationally, had to reflect on how enforceable £10,000 fines are, for example, and certainly there has been some discussion at a national level about whether or not that is the best way to enforce. I think actually we're better off engaging at the outset and making sure that people just reflect on what they should be doing. I believe in communities, and I actually believe in individuals, and I think that most people stand up to the plate, as they've proved so far.
Thank you, David. Colin, I've got you next on my list.
Thank you, Chair. 2 questions, if I may, to David. The first one prompted on roads policing, in fact, actually, and David may be aware that the speed management strategy is under review and has been out to public consultation with the County Council. That encompasses 20-mile-an-hour speed limits, and with David's support and active keenness to improve road safety, I wonder what the strategic view is of the Commissioner on 20-mile-an-hour speed limits.
Well, in many ways, Colin, they come about really through that piece called community concern. And the community concern was something which I championed very much, and I'd like to think that I'm very much part of the reason that speed management strategy has changed to allow community concerns in. Clearly, how they are enforced will need to be reflected upon, recognising that the roads policing unit is a specialist area which is likely still to have its hands very full around the high speed roads where risk of serious collision is or the impact of collision is far more serious. We will need to see how we can enforce it, but I think that if a community believes that they should have a 20-mile-an-hour scheme, we should act as servants of that community, and we will need. In my days, involved in county council, I reflect back that if you have a 20-mile-an-hour scheme, you do then need to design the road so that it is a 20-mile-an-hour road. If you've got a dual carriageway, which is a 20-mile-an-hour road, it won't work. We know that, and so it is incumbent upon the county council and others to reflect, when putting those schemes in, how they're going to be able to enforce that. And the first bit is, because all policing starts first of all about what we do for ourselves as communities, whether or not it is easily enforced by individuals thinking, yes, this is a 20 miles an hour road, and then the enforcement bit, which the police will bring in, I think, through use of cameras and use of those enforcement aids is more likely to be the way that we'll do it. But I think that things like our flashing signs, speed indicator devices work very, very well broadly, and let's just make sure that people police themselves with encouragement and then enforcement from the police, rather than assuming that we can just put up a 20-mile-an-hour sign and then think that other people will ensure that it happens, because it won't.
Thank you, David, for that comprehensive report, which I take, comment rather, which I take to be sort of strategically supportive of 20-mile-an-hour limits, because anecdotally we often get feedback that despite communities wanting them, we can't have them because the police are reluctant to enforce, and I certainly haven't found that to be the case locally. If I may move on to my other question, which is very different, and that is subsequent to the police and crime panel, there's a question that's been winging its way to you, which you may have already seen and may have some thoughts on, and that is, in October nationally there was a 10-hour blackout on the police national computer, which obviously, given the IT dependence that we are in these days, and increasingly so with the experiences of lockdowns, do you have any views at this stage about how Hertfordshire was affected and how resilience to avoid this dependency may be in the future?
Let me respond to your comment first of all on enforcement. I think it's I recognise that both locally police are willing to enforce, but clearly there is an issue of resource, and that also needs to be thought through. But I have picked up on occasion, when talking about some of the schemes that I'm trying to bring in places, and I have Fiona's on the panel today, and certainly there are residents in her neck of the woods who really are having to put up with traffic travelling at speeds that they shouldn't have to put up with, and want to do something about it. There are some people within the constabulary and within the county council who seem to feel that the community concerns shouldn't outweigh a matrix process, which says that other places would receive funding earlier. I disagree with that, and I'm fighting against that. I think if a community gathers together and raises its concern, we have a duty to support them. And so, I think we need to cut through that, and certainly I'm trying to cut through it. That said, both the county council and the constabulary have their processes, which rightly they will wish to use, and I understand why they do. But I think the community concern is something that every single one of us on this meeting today would wish to put at the front of what we're doing, because that's how we represent our communities, and I represent all the communities that everyone around here represents, and I just recognise that there are some places where it's a really high issue and we need to do something about it. Moving on to the blackout, I haven't actually got a view on that at the moment. I certainly haven't yet had a report where I can comment on what the impact of it has been. But what I can say is there was no day in October in Hertfordshire where you weren't properly policed and where you didn't have, you weren't safe in your streets. So although we use computers, as everyone does, as a source of information, that doesn't mean to say that you don't have policing if you don't have PNC up and running. The Police National Computer, for those who aren't as intimately aware of it as Colin clearly is a way of holding data on people. So where it will impact is you may well not know if someone has got previous history or whatever, but it perhaps isn't quite as much of an issue as the question would appear to make it seem. It doesn't mean to say there wasn't policing in Hertfordshire.
Thank you, David, very much indeed. Yeah, I was going to say finally, Simon, but I know Sue's coming. So Simon, if you can be, and then Sue will be the last one.
Yes, thank you, Terry. I wanted to take a bit of issue actually with what David said. I don't normally disagree with what you say, David, but it's on the matter of 20-mile-an-hour zones. I'm not a great fan. I never really have been. I don't think they work as they are. What we should be doing is making it difficult for people to speed. And I think you are not stopping accidents from happening, because youngsters will still run into the road after a football. Adults will still be texting while they cross the road, so they will still get hit by vehicles. It's just you're reducing the injury, which isn't a bad thing. But really, I think if we start going down the road of saying, well, the community wants it, so we must be their servant and provide it, is not a way to manage. I think if that is the way to do it, then I want some funding for some improvements in Norton, in my area on Letchworth North, where they're crying out for a crossing, and I am having to fund designs and things like that. Well, that is crying out for additional support and maybe a slower speed limit around the school area and things like that. So if anything, not necessarily for discussion, because I know we haven't got a lot of time, but I wanted to register my thoughts that we should be making it difficult to speed rather than just saying, well, there's a 20-mile-an-hour zone and let's leave it to people to police themselves. Because as we've had before, some areas where the police have loaned equipment, speeding equipment, and I was on a surgery with Swallow Hill recently, where well, it wouldn't have been recently, it would have been pre-COVID, thank you. But what the residents were saying there was that the majority of people they found that were speeding were residents of that area in the 20-mile-an-hour zone that actually probably put their hand up and said, yes, we need a lower zone rate. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you. It was more a comment than anything else, David.
And if I can quickly come back, if I've misled you, I apologise. It's worth clarifying so that we don't go away and say what he said was, because I thought I was fairly careful in where I picked it through. I believe that if a local community wants a 20-mile-an-hour zone, that is something for the community to sort out. However, and that's why I was talking about the role of the county council and the role of the police thereafter, as I think I said, we need to make sure then that road is a 20-mile-an-hour road. And by that, what I meant was that if you're driving down it, you say, yeah, I can't go faster than 20 miles an hour on this, because actually it's got, various humps, bumps, and chicanes within it. And so that is what the community then, has to accept, that if they're going to have this, that they're going to have a road which isn't as easy to drive down, because that's why you'll drive down it more slowly, and that you will have the items put in the road which make it slower, and that will allow people to reflect on, do they really want a 20 mile an hour as limit, or do they want something which makes it safe in different ways? But I think that if they all come up as a community, or if the vast majority of the community say, we want this in our place, we want it to be much slower, we're really concerned about it, and wherever you are, people are concerned about speed. Very often it's a misplaced concern. The concern is actually about inappropriate speed or inappropriate driving, and they feel that by putting up a 20 mile an hour sign that they will be able to change that. But if genuinely as a community they believe that, and as community representatives you're then bringing that forward, I think that our role has to be, or the role of the police has to be, to ensure that that wish is enforced alongside the self-enforcement which happens because the road can't be driven down at anything other than 20 miles an hour. So it's a little bit of a so if you feel that what I'm saying is there's a dead straight dual carriageway, it's now 20 miles an hour and we'll rely on the police enforcing it, no, that's not what I'm saying.
Okay, thank you, David.
Thank you.
I do also share the concerns that Simon makes, because putting speed humps in has pluses and minuses, and I know the ambulance service are not terribly keen on it, nor are the 40-footers that go up and down our roads and delivering. Sue, you want to come in? You raised your hand earlier, Sue. Do you want to come back with a comment?
My mic organised. Thank you, Chairman. No, it's been covered by Simon's comments. Thank you.
Okay, Sue, but I want to recognise. I think, as far as I'm concerned, then we have finished with you, David. Metaphorically speaking, we know your report to us, and thank you for your constructive input to us. And we do appreciate you spending the time, energy, and your team in keeping us up to date and up to speed. So thank you for that, and we look forward to. And
I'm always pleased to be here, and it's good to see friends around the table. Thanks very much. I realised looking at my photo on here, I didn't put my tie on this morning, did I? There you are, all looking very smart, and I apologise, Chair, for not wearing a tie. But,
we don't get excited about those sorts of things.
Simon too, you see.
I can rest assured, David, there are people who dress further down, shall we say, and attend these sessions, and it gets noticed as well by some people. So thank you anyway, and thank you for your team for attending.
Good to see you all. Take care.
You may stay for David for Colin's comments if you wish to, when he reports on the update on the police and crime panel. That's entirely up to you to attend.
I always feel that I wouldn't wish to constrain Colin in terms, although Chris sometimes then stays and listens in, but I feel that if I sit here, you may feel some constraint about what you might say. I know, being a shrinking violet, Colin, that you probably wouldn't want to let me know.
And on that note, over to you.
I'll say goodbye. Cheers.
Yeah.
Colin, over to you.
Are you ready for me, Chair?
I'm definitely over to. We have to note the report from the Police and Crime Commissioner, but we're not going to go through the rigmarole of having tick boxes and say noted, noted, noted. I'm sure you've all noted it and all listened to what's been said and given the opportunity to speak. So exactly the same thing will apply to your report, Colin.
Okay, right. Well, not constrained by the presence or otherwise of the Police and Crime Commissioner or staff, but sometimes I find that he's taken the wind out of my sails, because his report often covers what I was about to say, particularly when we've had a meeting quite close to the date. The Three Rivers District representative and I attended a national virtual training session back on the 29th of October. Though this was for new members, though neither of us actually are new members, we nevertheless found it informative and thought others would have benefited had they attended. I summarised my learnings from that training for the panel, and the chair encouraged other members to then undertake training as may be offered in the future. Our panel held its virtual meeting on the 12th of November, and once again we had IT issues, but eventually we did proceed later than scheduled and naturally finished later than scheduled. I was pleased that as a member of the public, Councillor John Hale managed to get his question on diversity answered in some detail by the Commissioner. I posed questions on the use of non-ring fence funding of the police pension and the outstanding issue of the HMI CFRS review, which had highlighted shortcomings in child protection. I'd raised these before and I now received satisfactory answers on both, with the PCC noting that the latter on child protection was now on track and there had been a change of personnel in the unit. We moved on to establishments and we were told that fewer officers are now leaving and more have been recruited, a net gain of 94 ahead of government funding. On diversity in recruitment, the PCC updated us on the significant uplifts in the 3 months April to June, but acknowledged that we are not where we would want to be yet. He mentioned that he now chairs a race equality group on the Criminal Justice Panel, and the local race equality board at Herts Police has been set up under Assistant Chief Constable Jepson. Mentoring and reverse mentoring schemes are also now established in Herts Police, and senior officers have been issued with a book by Rennie Edo-Lodge, Why I No Longer Talk to White People About Race. We also had a report on COVID policing, which has been raised earlier at this meeting, and some of the challenges of the release from Lockdown 1, with a bit of a last hurrah that people perhaps indulged in after getting out from that. He spoke about the partnership working, which has been going very well with districts and boroughs and others, and the application of the 4 E's that the chairman mentioned earlier: engage, explain, encourage, enforce. There was now some pressure on enforcement from public and councillors' reports, and as of the 16th of October, we were told there had been 400 verbal warnings and 40 fixed penalty notices. And government supported with funding some extra police patrols. Police were mindful, though, of of the need to retain policing by consent and maintaining good relations in the long term. There were some tension indicators coming out with recent protests and, sadly, assaults on emergency workers. We were reassured, though, that states and staff had been made COVID safe. COVID infections in the police had been low, but sadly, 2 of the non-operational staff had been lost to COVID. The panel was also advised that work is going on with mental health well-being, and a group has been set up led by a retired officer. The panel asked about the financial impacts from COVID on the budget, and the PCC said that there may have to be in future more budget sharing with partners and services may have to change, but that was a consideration for the future. On the question of PCSO support, the panel welcomed the response that it would be the wrong time to cut their number, and David said that they will remain under my watch. And as I mentioned earlier in this meeting, I subsequently raised the question of the 10-hour blackout on the police national computer, which it had been suggested had been due to human error. And this led nationally to no access to the PNC and wider impacts that are yet apparently to be assessed. So we anticipate a written response from the Commissioner on that. And specifically, I asked what was the immediate impact on Herts Constabulary, were there wider impacts, and if so, what? And how confident is the PCC in resilience as we move forward to being more reliant on IT? That's my report, panel.
Very, very good. Thank you, Colin. Any questions, comments? Anybody? I can't see any hands raised. I'm not seeing any hands raised by members of the panel. On that basis, then, can we note the report, please? And thank you again for keeping us up to date and up to speed, Colin. Please continue to do so and represent us. And as you said, anybody who's sitting around this table today can go and attend. As you said, I think John did. So please, I would encourage you, if you want to learn more, then just contact Colin and say you want to attend, and no doubt he'll tell you who, what, where, and when, and make sure you get the appropriate electronic invites. So thank you for that. We'll note your report. So I've probably taken a time on that. The next item I have on the agenda, I think, is Recycling Centre update. And I think David Allen's going to take this, is he? Let me first of all welcome you, David. Welcome you because I believe you came over with from Amy to HCC. If I'm right in saying before that you worked for East Herts, is that right?
I have, for my sins, worked various areas. East Herts was one. There was a time when I was with Hertfordshire County Council as well, managing the contracts and the contractors that were there at the time. So, yeah, travelled around a little bit, but back with Hertfordshire County Council now, having transferred over with Amy at the beginning of October.
Okay, so you're the recycling services, recycling centre service manager who, if you like, runs recycling centres for us.
Yes, I'm responsible for the sites in Hertfordshire.
Okay, so we know where to go to then. Okay, that's great. Thank you very much indeed. And you're going to give us a feedback on where we stand on recycling centre updates, please, yeah?
Yes, will do. Thank you, Chair. Let me start with the need for members to understand that this is an information-only report, and I'd ask that it is noted that it's so as an information report only. So if we look at where we stand at the moment, we have 17 household waste sites in Hertfordshire now. We've got where opening recently. We have got the services open at all sites apart from Coal Green and Buntingford. Given the difficulties of the restrictions, it is difficult to be able to provide a service in them areas. We have had a couple of incidences of fly tip, but we do regularly monitor the sites to make sure that it's being managed properly. We have also, given the restrictions, had to close the shops at the Waterdale site and the Ware site, but we're continuing to quarantine items and save them ready for sale when we are able to, hopefully in December, unless things change. If I move on to the service itself, in that, I'd like you to please note the fact that we have been busier this year than we were last year. We are seeing a bit of a downtrend in waste at the moment because of the green waste and the changes you have with seasonality. The transformation process, as we've changed from Amy to Hertfordshire County Council, has gone very well. There's some training planned for things such as customer services, and there is a lot of recruitment going on at the moment, and we're going through that process as I speak. We're also looking to implement training for 360 plant, which we're looking to introduce next year, and that will help us with managing waste and compacting containers and reducing vehicle movements around the county. The permit, as it stands at the moment, still is with Amy, and that's as we go through the transformation process, and it's hoping that the permit itself will be transferred over to Hertfordshire County Council early next year. We're working very closely with the EA to make sure that we're compliant and we're doing everything that needs to be done. As we went through the transformation, there was a need for us to make sure that the contracts were all in place, and we've again been working very closely with the off-takers to make sure that that's all gone okay, and it has. We've obviously been working very closely before the transformation, and nothing's really changed as far as the operations is concerned. So again, that's worked very well. The customer service centre, again, that was part of the transformation process. We have got some meetings booked just to make sure that there's a clear understanding for the guys and girls at the call centre, and they're aware and know what is exactly going on the ground and able to answer questions. The Ware site itself is great. It's working really well, and I know some of the members have been along to the opening, but if anybody wishes to visit the site and they haven't done yet, then please get in touch. It's a great facility, something I'm very proud to be involved with, and has been well received amongst users and industry alike. There is a link to a promotional video which is really good in giving an insight as to what facilities we've got at Ware, and I think everybody will agree that it's a really great facility to have. And as now, well, we need to monitor and look at how that's involved or impacted the site surrounding the Ware site, and we're monitoring and looking at that at the moment. That's all from me, Chair. If there's anything else that I haven't covered in the report, I'm quite happy to look at.
Okay, I have a few, and I see that Joan's coming as well. Before you come in, Joan, I have a couple of questions for you. Yeah, you mentioned the other two sites which are not open, Cold Green and Bunningford. What are the plans for those? Will they be open soon? Will they not be open soon?
We have to continue to review. We have looked at it. The restriction is given the site size and the number of parking spaces. So we're very much reacting to what the restrictions are in place. If, for example, there was an introduction of face masks in an outside environment or something like that, we could look at it and perhaps monitor it or manage it in a different way. But it really is down to the size and making sure that the site users and staff are able to distance themselves and be able to protect themselves. And
Chewing Road?
I've got no further information on Chewing. I know that there's plans in place, but I'm sorry, I can't give you any more information on where we are with that.
That was a wrong. Really, that question should not be aimed at you. I do beg your pardon, David. It really should be aimed at someone like Simon, who no doubt can comment on that. Simon, you want to comment on that?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Chewing Road is the proposed new shared supersite HWRC with Welland and Hatfield, one of their highways depots. Not highways, sorry, ground maintenance depots. Yeah, going well. We're going to Development Control Committee, all being well, next week, in fact. So we'll see how that goes. Hopefully we'll receive planning permission, in which case we'll then move to start implementing it. There's some objections. There will be an objection, I suspect, at Development Control around highways issues, but we're hopefully getting those resolved. So money's in the bank for that as well. Fingers crossed we can move it forward if we get planning permission.
Thank you for that. I've got Joan, you would like to ask a question of David?
Yes, please. Thank you. Very briefly, it's on the recruitment that you mentioned. I'm just wondering, when did it start? How is it going? And how many people are you looking to recruit?
We've had a very good response. We're looking to recruit 20 members of staff, and what's happened is, because of the transformation process, we found we were using a lot of agency staff, and hence that's why we've got that number of people that we need to recruit to. As I say, we are going through the process at the moment, and it's working very well. We need to have a summary of who we're actually going to offer positions to. But no, it's very positive, very positive.
Thank you.
Not any other questions. I'll ask another one while I can. I noticed in the report there were some IT requirements that are outstanding at Harpenden and St Albans recycling centres, which have been works have not yet been completed by BT. That was when the report was written. How does it stand today, David?
We're still waiting. We did actually have an officer at Harpenden waiting for BT to carry out the works there, and that's for them to fit an internet connection, and they didn't actually turn up. So we've chased that up and are now looking for them to complete the works at St Albans and Harpenden in early December. The sites are still operational. We are able to work on site remotely, and the camera systems for the site that are seen on the website are operational. Officers are allowed to work there at the moment. They can tether from their phones if they really need to. There are other facilities around the county, so we're not restricted by that. And the other issue that we would have if the shop was open at Harpenden was for there to be a card payment machine. And again, because we're not operational at the moment, it's not impacting on the service or forcing us to do anything else. So we'll continue to chase to make sure them works are completed.
Okay, thank you, David. Yes, the reuse centres. I said the third one is at Harpenden. Yeah, I've got you, Paul. I've got you, Tim. I'll come back to you. They are certainly the one at Ware is phenomenal. I know that on the first day when they opened there, John, who runs those things for us, said he took £1,500 on the first day that was open, which just goes to show that those reuse facilities are something which, wherever we start building, and we mentioned Chewing Road, for example, if we have the capacity and have the space, we really have to have reuse facilities in there, because they are definitely viable and definitely something which the community would like to see, rather than put it in the skip. I think there's a few television programmes that encourage these sorts of things, and we should continue to encourage them. Paul, welcome. I didn't get you earlier. Glad you were with us. You would like to make some comments?
Thanks, Terry. It was just on under 5.4 of the report that it mentions about increasing the number of staff at the sites, or the complement of staff. It was mentioned about we're moving more from contractors to permanent. I just wanted to understand in terms of, will that bring about an improved service, and also just to understand clearly about what cost implication that might have, moving from contractors to permanent, which I guess would be a better position to be in terms of to have people employed rather than contractors, so they'll be more committed. But just in terms of terms and conditions and that additional cost and how that might affect the budget against what was against the actual spend against what the budget when it was set.
David, do you want to handle that, or you want Simon to handle that?
I think there's some confusion here amongst contractors and agency staff. Although we've transferred over to Hertfordshire County Council, the recruitment was around staff in numbers, in that with agency staff you haven't got the commitment and training and everything else that goes with it. So I think is that I understand it? As I say, it's not about contractors, it's about agency staff.
I think David's right. Bringing in new HCC staff, so 20 people will be on HCC terms and conditions instead of using agency, is a benefit. It's good news. And yes, Paul, I sincerely hope we will see improvements, because those staff are likely to be with us longer. David and the team will get them trained. They're less likely to move on. So it's all very positive. Budget-wise, the panel, or some of the panel, if they're around, will know that towards the end of the contract, Amy were losing significant sums of money. There is there will be a line in the integrated plan for this year for a pressure starting, get this right, 22-23, because there's no doubt us bringing the service back in house will cost the county council more money. We were very upfront about that throughout the report to this panel. We put, I think, £1 million in there. You may ask why it is only starting in 22-23 rather than next year. That's because we did receive a settlement from Amy. Again, it was part 2 item of the panel, I think, a while ago, so you know that figure. I won't repeat it now, which will see us through until that time. But yes, bringing the service back in house has put a pressure on the authority. But I think we can make a better job than Amy did. Dave and the team are brilliant. All the existing Amy staff, bar one, TUPE'd across onto HCC terms conditions, which is a positive result and reflects well on us, I think. The one person that didn't is about to retire, so we didn't expect him to anyway. So all good news, but yes, a pressure.
Thank you for that. So I would add that yes, whilst we look to improve the service, Amy, when they were operating, that gave us a very, very good service indeed, even in very trying financial times for them. So we were impressed with what they did and how they did it. So, and we mentioned that to them when we were with them. So, Tim, you want to come in?
Thank you, Terry. I think Simon just highlighted some of the points I was going to raise, and it has been picked up in the comments by Josh there. But I do believe, and what we've heard today, the transfer from Amy to HCC went very well. There are many hurdles to cross when you do projects like this and transfers like this, so it has gone extremely well. I do believe we as a Cabinet panel should record our thanks and congratulations to the team for doing this so well, to Simon, to Matt, to David, and to the whole team. And it was also done at the same time as, of course, opening up of the Ware Recycling Centre, which was a big project. So just want to say thank you to the team there.
Yeah, thank you for that, Tim. Yeah, also, I might add they were trying to make sure all the other sites were COVID compliant as well at the same time, which was a bit of a task. So those 3 big jobs, which Simon and his team, particularly Matt, was heavily involved in, as well as others that I could name, but certainly, yes, it went smoothly. Let me just add one more thing about the sites that David runs. We, of course, made sure before we made the announcement that we were going to keep them open in lockdown 2, we made sure that we were compliant with government requirements, government so that we were maintaining social distancing. So we were having the barriers up so people did not get too close to each other. So we continue to do that all our sites to make sure that they are COVID compliant, and we'll continue to do so. But we had to close the reuse shops because they are not essential shops. Any other thoughts and comments? I don't think I'm getting any more. Other than that, I think we're content with that. We are asked to note the report from David. Can we note that? Yes, please. Thank you. Right, the next thing is, I think we're going to talk about proposed changes to the fire and rescue service. I believe the automatic fire alarms. And I think that Andrew, you going to take this, or Chris going to take this?
It'll be me, I believe, unless Andy has joined us. Just pause for a moment, but otherwise it's me. No, good, okay. So
Tim, take your hand down, Tim, for me, please. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. So this paper is proposing a trial to no longer attend automatic fire alarms in offices or retail premises until such time as we've had an independent call to confirm a fire. So by way of background, members will recall some time ago the service moved away from attending business premises during the working day until we had a second call from the premises away from the collector station and the automated system to confirm that there was a fire, at which point we would attend. The history to this position is the call rates to automatic fire alarms have been increasing, and so it's important that we consider the data around that incident type or that call type and mitigate it to ensure that we provide the best service to the public of Hertfordshire. If we consider those numbers, when we think about the sort of 2,500 calls a year, actually that's a huge amount of resource drain on the organisation for what inevitably turns out to be a false alarm. And so the service are proposing that we extend the non-attendance policy that we have, and as I say, for the previous 5 years we've not attended during 9 to 5 within business premises. Back in November 19 we took a position to extend that from 7 in the morning to 7 in the evening because a number of retail and office and other business premises were still occupied during that time, and indeed if we think about some of our large supermarkets, it's 24/7. And so we could comfortably rely on a call from a member of the public or from the premises itself to confirm there was a fire for us to then respond to an actual call for help as opposed to a notification of an alarm. This isn't new news. This has been tried and tested in other parts of the country, and we as a service have taken an incremental approach to this, hence 5 years plus ago moving to a non-attendance during the working day, then extending it, and now proposing to the authority that we don't attend those business premises at all until that second call is received. The landscape across UK Fire and Rescue is there's been 17 fire and rescue services that are well developed into a non-attendance policy, and then we have some specific outliers, and they're listed in the paper further down in 4.22 and 4.23, I believe, which points us towards both the 17 organisations that aren't responding to a number of call types, but then you get an organisation like Kent Fire and Rescue that pretty much don't attend anything until they've had a second call. Our position here is that we will still respond to care homes, hospitals, high-risk premises, anything attached to private dwellings, and so that level of risk management we believe is the right method. And what we propose to do is start a trial in the new calendar year that will last for 12 months, which will allow us to not attend offices first, and then at a subsequent point we will bring into that retail. The reason we've chosen those two environments and in that order, office premises, well, of course, we've got people on lockdown, so there's not so many people in those offices at the moment, which reduces the risk and the potential. And of course, when we move to retail, we aim to do that once we move out of lockdowns and we're in a much clearer picture in relation to COVID in terms of occupation when we move to a non-attendance position. So our hope is to deal with 26% of the unwanted fire alarm calls, which are false alarms, which are in the business and retail environments. We will still attend high-risk premises. This is an incremental approach that we're taking, having already started this journey within the county 5+ years ago. There are plenty of studies and services that have already done this and have gone much further, and we believe this is the right phased approach to learn from the data and ensure that we provide the service that we would want to provide. I think that's the paper, Chair.
Okay, I've got a few questions, but I see that Joshua and Simon have come in as well. So, first of all, Joshua, you want to come in?
Thanks, Chair. As I said, there's a slight delay between you asking me and me actually speaking. So hopefully you can hear me now, but I might be 5 seconds in the future from you saying this. So I've got a few concerns and queries related to this, and I would like a number of these minuted, please. So firstly, I want to direct people's attention to points 413 to 417. So I think it's important, firstly, to note that we're regularly told about not confusing risk and demand. And I can't help but feel that these points alongside 4123 do exactly that. Clearly, I agree that these case numbers don't represent a statistically large sample of incidents, but any one of these 7 fires could have developed into significant incidents had they not been attended earlier. So the report also refers to these being non-occupied premises. However, when dealing with significant fires, the lives of those firefighters are at heightened risk if they've already developed into major incidents. So had they been attended earlier, it's not that there's no risk to human life, because the life of the firefighters is put in greater jeopardy. Secondly, I want to highlight point 422. So this is in relation to the authority not being aware of any legal claims as a result of non-attendance at these. Now, I'd ask every member here this: do we want to be the first of those legal claims or not? And, if it isn't us, who will it be? Because, as a result of this sort of policy change, we could lead ourselves into a situation where non-attendance was actually the wrong legal decision to make. And it feels to me that a county that often prides itself in not taking risks, removing this form of mitigation, is treading quite closely to a more dangerous situation. Thirdly, I want to raise point 426. It does surprise me that there haven't been any adverse comments from businesses that have been recorded, but certainly given what it says in the report in 4.20. That 60% of businesses, i.e. a majority of businesses after a major incident, don't recover. So it feels strange that they wouldn't have recorded any concerns with non-attendance of fires at some of their businesses. Then there's a point in 5.3 that is. So I agree that the best way to make any change is via a trial, but it's not clear what a successful trial scenario would be. So, for example, if there was a major incident this year that evolved from the non-attendance, would that be a fail condition for this trial? And if there are no incidents, for example, would that be a success? Now, I would argue the latter could not be a success, because you're not testing what would have happened in the event that a fire had not developed. So it's difficult to actually assess what would and would not be a successful trial. So I'd like to hear a bit more about what you believe trial success is. And then finally, and I did express, I've expressed this point elsewhere, and that's in relation to point 419, how following the trial that this responsibility will be delegated to the exec member and the chief fire officer. I think, we're elected to this panel to support decision making, not just be reported to. So on democratic grounds, I also feel that this proposal falls short. We should be consulted with and help to make the decisions via this panel. So unless I can be convinced on a number of those points, I can't recommend to other members here that we support this. And I would argue to them that for those reasons, we shouldn't be accepting these changes. Thank you.
Thank you, Josh, for that. I'm sure that Chris can respond to those points you've raised. Chris, you want to come in?
Yes, please. Yeah, thank you, Chair. So thank you, Councillor. In terms of the firefighter safety aspect in the developing fire, the data is the data, and that's why we presented it, to ensure that we are transparent about, 2,600 calls a year, or there or thereabouts, and the actual data is in the paper. And then when we transpose that to over 3 years, having 7 incidents which resulted in a fire, all of which were contained, we present that because it's right and proper to show you the detail of the data, but then to offer you professional judgment and to explain the case and hopefully provide reassurance to you all that actually this is around ensuring that whilst we are sending fire appliances to automatic fire alarms which aren't confirmed as fires, we're moving those resources to deal with something that we shouldn't have to go to, which then doesn't mean that resource is available when we do have a confirmed fire. And as we move those resources to those unwanted calls, those false calls, then actually those appliances can't be covering the area that they would have been covering because they're committed, and we have to move our resources around. So actually, by non-attendance at these incident types, we have the potential to improve firefighter safety and cover for the rest of the county. Notwithstanding, there is a risk. We do have to hold the risk, and I wouldn't want to not tell you that that's what we're doing, because that's what we're proposing. But we recommend to you that it is a much smaller risk than having those resources committed when they don't have to be and could be available to support firefighting efforts elsewhere. So I think I hope that gives you a level of reassurance, but I understand that it is always going to have a residual of risk, but we believe it is manageable, and that again is set against the backdrop of 17 other services doing this. Even Essex actually have stopped attending 7 categories of AFA. We are only proposing for a trial to stop attending 2 categories. So I think the road movement risk, the ability to have firefighters respond to confirmed fires and improve the opportunity for productivity in terms of risk-based inspections, community education and prevention work, and being available for general fire cover far outweighs the risk of these very few incident types. So I think I hope that gives you some clarity on those points. In terms of the success criteria, clearly officers will keep that well monitored in terms of trying to understand the numbers of incidents and whether we are seeing a negative impact in relation to those call challenges. And again, I'd remind members, if I may, that we have been call challenging, and we are not going to these incident types and haven't been for 5 years during daylight hours or working hours. So we have our own pilot scheme, if you like, our own trial that's been going on for a number of years, and we'll continue to monitor that and respond to the data and the changes that we see through this next 12-month period. In terms of consultations, we have had 2 responses. One was entirely supportive. The other was supportive, but with a note of caution around not attending retail premises during lockdown because there's no one there to see the issue should it occur. And the other reason it's not detailed in this paper is because it landed last night. Thank you for raising it, and of course it's important that we share it, and I suppose that's the point about the trial not starting until into next calendar year, and we have some sense of certainty around occupation of retail premises, and of course that's why we want to go first with business premises, because as I've said already, some of those are not occupied but low risk in terms of low occupancy and obviously in a retail environment, stock and valuables are within the premises, and so we want to do this in a gradual way with the people we serve. So they would be hopefully some of the points. And in terms of 4.19, I think that's a matter for the panel, Chair.
Yeah, thank you for that, Chris. I hope that satisfies you. Response, Josh. There, I would add that I don't have any problem if in a year's time that Chris comes back to us and tells us where we stand, how successful the consultation has been or unsuccessful, and what issues have happened during that time. Let me add that if any issues happen before that 1 year trial is out, then of course we reserve the right, like both the officers do and I do as well, to say stop. We're going backwards. We're going back to where we were. But I think it's appropriate that in a year's time, or whenever anything else happens, that we come back to the panel and tell them what the latest status is. So can we make sure that happens, please?
Yeah.
Thank you. Simon, as an ex-firefighter, you want to come in?
Yes, thank you very much. Look, I don't want to use bias, and I always seem to have something to poke my nose in when it comes to a fire service issue. I've got to say, I've got a bit of an issue with this particular one. Normally, I'm very supportive because I can see the more management side of things that we've got to do, but I'm a little bit disturbed by it, and I don't want my bias really to influence too much in that way. I'll try and explain. I absolutely, completely agree. A fire alarm is your fire alarm, be that a residential accommodation. So I've got fire alarms here, you'd expect that. They are my responsibility. And the same with commercial premises. It's their fire alarm. And this is what I often say to people, well, all the fire service aren't going to come out. That's fine. It's your fire alarm. Sort it out. Have a plan in place. However, I think if we just blithely go on and say, oh, we're not going to attend because it could be a false alarm, is going to I mean, maybe lead us down an avenue we don't want to go down. I think the numbers of fires that we get, and I hear what you say, Chris, about, oh, well, you know, they could be freed up for other incidents. That's not the case, though, is it? I very much doubt, we haven't got the figures there, but I very much doubt we could come up with anything to say, apart from once in a blue moon, oh, well, you know, they were answering a false alarm and they could have been going to this major RTC on the motorway. I'm sure you could prove me wrong, I don't know, but I think that's really what comes across to me. So I don't think that's an issue. I think what I'd like to see is maybe a bit more of a risk-based approach. I know you're taking a stepped approach to it and looking at commercial premises. Definitely with commercial premises, fine. Retail units, my company's been doing a lot of work recently with a major small convenience store. And we've been going all over the country doing assessments because of third-party risk. And the vast majority of these have got vulnerable people in flats above the retail element. And I think if there was nobody there at night to answer an alarm, or we were just going to say no until somebody confirms that there's a fire, certainly in those sort of premises, we're going to have a problem. So I think maybe a risk-based approach there. Plus, also, I do remember going out. One of the great things about being in the fire service was going round to and seeing members of the public and talking to them about fire safety, giving them fire alarms, putting them up for them. But there was occasions where there were people there that were not able to respond. I quite clearly remember one guy who couldn't move and had to have a carer at various hours to put him into bed and out of bed. And his concern was he had lots of smoke detectors, but he couldn't raise an alarm. He couldn't do anything. Where you rely then on that. And I know that's a one-off. That's one out of hundreds of thousands of people that live in Hertfordshire. But I think maybe what I'd like to see, support it, but maybe a more risk-based approach to it.
I'm going to come back on that, Chris. I know that we're not talking domestic here, but please come back on it, Chris.
Yeah, thank you. And Councillor, we're obviously cut from similar cloth, so I can understand all of what you're saying. So a couple of things for me. I understand the challenge around those few occasions where it will be deployed to an AFA, and actually it could have been another incident. I get that, it's the art of small numbers. I understand your argument. I know you recognise that there will be some occasions, but I don't have the data to convince you one way or the other. I think it's professional anecdotal evidence that it could. I think the bits, and I'm really grateful for the questions because there's a couple of bits I'd draw your attention to, if I may. So, and apologies if I glossed over it in my presentation. So firstly, 4.9 within the report will show you that we are taking a risk-based approach. And so the higher risk premises will continue to get attendances. I think I highlighted care homes and schools and other bits, but I didn't give you the full list. So if I could draw your attention to 4.9 and certainly the last 2 bullet points. And so where we see an office or a premises with, you know, I would call it shop and dwellings, where we've got private residences above, that changes the game. That's getting attendance. And where we work with safeguarding and other agencies and a multi-agency approach to vulnerability, and again, that's the importance of working with county and districts and boroughs and all the rest of it to ensure that we have a rich understanding of vulnerability data, so we can put things in place to ensure that we're continuing to respond to individuals that are impacted by policy decisions. So this has to be low risk, it has to be confined to offices, and it has to be confined to retail in the second phase. But we have to understand, acknowledge and respond to the challenges which make those complex built environments not simple built environments. And so I hope that starts to demonstrate our commitment to do exactly as you sort of described, Simon. The second bit I would take you to, please, is within the appendices of the pack. I think it's page 11 within the report, page 49 as I see it in the pack that I have. And this is talking about those incident rates across stations. And I suppose it's not, it does help with Pan County cover for operational response. But what it also means is, and I hope I alluded to it earlier, this is an opportunity to increase risk-based inspections with businesses, safe and well visits with families in their homes, improve training, talking to Councillor Bennett Lovell's point around safety of firefighters. So if they're available to do more training and do more exercising and be more available to reduce risk, PCC was talking about our prevention approach, and as you know, over 10 years we've halved the number of domestic fires. That is what we want to be concentrating on. We want to drive down these instances of fire, educate and prevent before we have to respond, as you well know. But I hope both the table gives you an illustrative description of how we can redeploy our time and effort to meet exactly that demand, to reduce the risk from it even happening.
Yeah, I did see the sort of risk-based thing, but it just seemed like just a regular ones that you would absolutely do anyway. Care homes and things like that. You would not look at doing something like that. I mean, even I would say maybe even looking at a daytime and a nighttime procedure is good. And forgive me if I've missed that. I've had so much going on at the moment that I might have missed that in the report. But something like that. I just it's those and it's, to me, it's public perception. Business perception, I'll argue against that, because business perception, well, you should be paying for managing your fire alarm and response to it and things like that. If you get a key holder, a security company to come round, absolutely, that's what you should be doing. You shouldn't be making people pay out of their council tax. But when it comes to residential accommodation, we're there to serve, and I think that's where I'm coming from. I'll leave it at that. Thank you. Thanks for the comments, Chris.
Thanks, Councillor.
Simon.
Fiona, you want to come in? I've got you as well, Paul.
Thank you, Chairman. My points have been addressed. They were similar to Simon's concerns over residents in retailers, particularly if they were in quiet town centres. So thanks for that, Chris.
I think that response from Chris does answer those questions in terms of what, why and how we're going to, because it does clearly say that those areas of risk we are going to assess, if you like, every premise. We can't assess every premise, but certainly those which are vulnerable, and where we assess them to be vulnerable, we will continue to respond, as it says, I think, in 4.9, where other circumstances determine that the attendance should be made. And I think you mentioned some of those areas where we have residents who are living above various premises, including above fire stations. It might even be in the case of Hertford. So I think it covers that particular one. Paul, you want to come in?
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I'm sorry to harp on about, but it's the very same issue that still concerns me, and I sort of have similar concerns to Simon. And I'm concerned by the reference to the residential, the offices, and particularly above offices with the mix of residential and commercial that can be above. And it might not be that, and it's that definition of how do we know when the call's made depending who's making the call. And the funny thing is, I had a fire on a couple of Saturdays ago, exactly in residential above commercial. Thankfully, it was all compliant, heat alarms, smoke detectors. The door was shut, so it never got into. There was a fire check door, never got through the rest of the property. But the kitchen was pretty much burnt out. Thankfully, no one was at home. They left the window open. Smoke was billowing out of a window. Otherwise, you could have had a serious fire, and there were lots of flats within that building. And I'm just concerned about how that definition is made, that there is residential above commercial. How do we know that when the call comes through, that maybe that single call? And added to that, in situations where, when you get into the residential side of rentals and things like that, there's a lot of people out there that aren't complying with the law and are turning space above, which could be commercial, commercial space into residential illegally. And I'm concerned by the people that might be staying in that residential accommodation, that they may not be protected. And how do we address that concern? And how sure are we that we can address those issues satisfactorily? Thank you.
Chris?
Yeah, okay, thanks, Chair. Thank you, Councillor. So in terms of those non-compliant, illegal built environments, that is absolutely for our protection teams working with districts to ensure that we identify and enforce where appropriate. We would absolutely, when discovered it's an alleged fire risk, we would then go out and do a visit. Our protection teams would be involved, district council will be involved, and we'll look to put an enforcement or prohibition notice to stop occupation of those environments. So I think in terms of places where we have people that aren't following the rules and aren't being responsible, there's a mechanism to deal with that. As ever, the challenge is discovering it in the first place. In terms of, but we are clearly out there doing that, pretty much all the time, whether that's through operational crews, protection officers, volunteers, district officers. There is a whole team approach to improving the safety of the built environment and meeting regulation. In terms of this particular trial, apologies, but just to confirm again, if there is residential attached to the premises, we will still be making an attendance. They are not on the list of the simple business premise built environment type that we would not be responding to until we had a confirmed or a second call. So anything with residential attached, we will intend to go to. And how do we know about that? Well, that's either through protection efforts, but also, as you'll see in 4.9, when we start talking about those risk assessments based on local knowledge. So actually, the work between now and when the trial starts will be for operational crews and my operational staff to go out and confirm those locations and the fact that they are, as recorded, offices or retail, and there are no complicating factors, which means we would continue to attend. So subject to your support or not today and moving through the political process, officers will then start the work of quality assuring and cross-checking the data that we already hold as we start to create the list of those premises that we won't attend until we have that second call. And that is how the control team will understand whether it's an attendance or a non-attendance based on a risk assessment and risk-based approach. I hope that answers.
Josh, you want to come back?
Thanks, Chair. Yes, I do. What I've realised is I put some comments into the chat function, but those aren't public. So for the interest of those watching, Chris, you said that, to some degree, you've had a trial ongoing during the daytime, although I challenge that because, they're not the same thing, are they? The risk at night time is higher than the risk in the daytime, because there simply aren't people around to the same degree that there are in the day. So, whilst that might be some de-risking of, moving to this phased nighttime approach, it's not a fair comparison. So I challenge that. Secondly, when you say that, we could be redeploying resources elsewhere at night time or to do some of these other visits, well, okay, let's say, as Simon points out, there was a situation where there is attendance at, a false alarm, and they could have been elsewhere. I accept that one, but you also seem to suggest that we could be doing other things, such as, the educational side of things that the fire service do. I don't think we're going to be doing those at night time, though, are we? I don't think, again, we're going to be redeploying services to do some of the things that you've suggested that we could be doing otherwise at the times of day that we're considering here. Now, look, I understand why the data was included, but, as you say, the data is the data. I think it's also important to say the risk is the risk. And what we're doing here is putting ourselves at higher risk. Now, ultimately, I think the problem here is that we simply don't have enough resources to spread around. We don't have enough firefighters. And the simplest answer to mitigate the problems that we're looking at here is that we need more firefighters and we need more resources for them. So, Chair, I'll finish there. Thank you. I haven't changed my mind as to regards how I'll be voting on this. Cheers.
Thank you. Yeah, I thought somewhere along the line we get back to that subject, Josh, of the campaign you're running at the moment. I see no other questions, comments on people asking for comment. We looked at this in great detail. It is a trial. We want to see if it works. Officers have assessed the risk to be absolutely minimal, and also have put a lot of things in place to mitigate any risks whatsoever, particularly to residential properties. So where people are living, and we list those down, and also add to that, as we have, as included in that, is where residential is above offices or above any other facilities. So it does mean that those people in residential are covered 24/7, 7 days a week, if their alarm goes off. Now, their alarm, they may not be the people who have the alarm. It may be the premises below that has the alarm. And therefore, I could argue and say, yes, it's all well and good saying that we'll protect those, but that's where the assessment comes in. That is where risk assessment by the relevant group commanders will come in to make sure that those people are included on the list of we must respond, or we will respond as and when it's deemed appropriate if we haven't received a call. So on that basis, if we are looking now, I guess, now we've had all the comments, I can't see anybody else coming in. We need to take a vote on this if we can, please. So if I can ask you to go to chat. And if we can, put in there the expression I think we used was for, against, abstain. So what you would like is for, against, abstain in there, please. It would be appreciated in chat. Thank you, colleagues. It looks like we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We have a majority on this of 4, 1 against, I believe. Can you confirm the officers, please?
Chair, my vote doesn't seem to be there.
Can you type in what you would like to be?
I did, yes. I typed against, and I couldn't see anything coming up. I'll try again.
Yes, please, if you could, John.
Thank you. Has it come up now? Yes, I
yes,
think it has.
We've got 10
yep.
for, 2 against.
Okay, thank you.
Michelle, 10 for, 2 against, yes? With Jones in, yes? Excellent, thank you. And thank you for the constructive comments we've had there. I hope, Chris, you've taken those comments away and can recognise that there are some concerns. We all have concerns when it comes to the safety of the public, but we have to really make sure we mitigate as many of those as possible and do all we can to put in place to make sure that the people of Hertfordshire continue to have that they do today, the reliance on the fire and rescue service, which they know will be responsive to their needs. So thank you for that. The next item on the agenda is, I think, Sustainable Hertfordshire Strategy. Is that right, Julie?
Yes, please. Thank you, Chair. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning. I have reason to believe what you're going to do is go through some slides for us, which will particularly look at some general slides, but then look at specifics which relate to these portfolios. And it's those portfolios, which is the community safety and waste management, where I'll be asking cabinet members to make their comments on those specifics rather than the general comments around sustainability. But certainly, if we can concentrate, because I think, Julie, we're right in saying that you're going to each one and every one of these cabinet panels and making the case there. Yeah?
Yes, that's right. And we appreciate.
Before you start, John, your hand is up. Do you want it? If you have a comment to make, or you want to take it down?
Just a quick comment, Terry. Given the amount of time that this section might take and the importance, I was wondering whether it'd be best to take a break now rather than at 12. But I'll leave it up to your judgment as chair.
Very good idea. Yes, only two, please. Can we have a 5-minute break, please, for all of you before you start, Julie? Sorry to.
No problem at all.
Further. It is now 11:35. Can we come back at 11:40, please? Officers, can you control that for us? So 5-minute break. Thank you very much indeed. I'll come back in 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Chair, and good morning, panel. As Terry said, this is a complicated and lengthy report and appendix as well. So what I've done is I've pulled together a couple of PowerPoint slides just to take members through the document itself. There's not very many slides. I'll take you through the document and then we can open the floor up to comments and questions. Okay, so this is the Sustainable Hertfordshire Strategy Action Plan, and I specifically pulled out references to community safety and waste in terms of the specific portfolio areas and the services that are covered by this particular panel. Just a very brief background, as members will be aware, the County Council declared a climate emergency last July at the same time as unveiling the new corporate plan with the wish to be a cleaner, greener and more environmentally sustainable county. Following that declaration of a climate emergency, officers were asked to prepare the Sustainable Hertfordshire Strategy, which we did, and the strategy was approved by Cabinet this March. In order to support that strategy and the ambitions within it, officers were then asked to prepare a detailed action plan for how we could actually achieve those ambitions. And work began on developing the action plans in March. Members will obviously be aware that that was exactly the same time as COVID, and officers were very keen to be involved in the Sustainable Hertfordshire work alongside their responses to the COVID-19 pandemic. In terms of the strategy itself, this has also been presented to all Cabinet panels previously and is separated out into the 3 different levels of influence: lead in terms of our own operations and how we can change the way that we're working to make a difference, and then enable and inspire, and that reflects the fact that we have a population of 1.2 million people, lots of partners that we work with, programmes that we're seeking to deliver, and policies, all of which we can hopefully influence to be able to enable and inspire others to make a difference. As I said, in order to deliver the ambitions outlined in the strategy, we have now an action plan. The action plan has been developed by all officers across all service areas, putting forward suggestions for actions that could be taken forward, and we had a considerable amount of actions put forward for consideration. All of the actions have been reviewed, assessed, categorised, rationalised, and also standardised in terms of their language. So Appendix A to the paper identifies over 200 actions, and these are being taken through every single panel so that we can spark debate and get panels' views on the actions that we've set out. They're categorised in a number of different ways. We have quick wins. Those are the actions that can be delivered within existing resources, and they are set out in the appendix at pages 7 to 12 and 27. We then have key works programmes, and these are areas where we would like to pursue the actions, but we need to undertake further investigation. And these are set out at pages 13 and 24 and 27 and 30 in the appendix. Then we have key future work programmes, and these are fairly substantial actions that we really do need to fully scope in terms of the areas that we could cover before we can understand the level of impact that they may have and also the cost implications. And so they're set out in pages 24 to 26 and 31 to 32. And then in order to give a full picture of everything that the County Council is doing at present, we also have business as usual activities, and these are set out in an appendix to the action plan. And then Appendix B to the panel paper itself is a much less detailed and more pictorial approach, an easy read version of the action plan, and the intention of that particular document is to have that put on the website as an accompaniment to the Sustainable Hertfordshire Strategy itself. It should be noted that the wording therefore will be slightly different in the two different documents, and that's because we didn't feel that over 200 actions needed to be published. We wanted to try and consolidate those, group them into levels of and areas to be able to provide the easy read version, which could then be put on the web. In terms of the actions themselves, there are lots of them, and so we have highlighted 19 enabling actions, and these are duplicated at page 4, from page 4 to page 6, Appendix A to the panel paper. And these have been highlighted because we want to prioritise those, because if we undertake these particular 19, it will enable us to take further action. So we need to make sure we've done the feasibility studies to be able to pursue further actions that we've highlighted as being important. Each action has been dedicated to a specific portfolio area. And the reason that we have done this is because Sustainable Hertfordshire itself doesn't fit within one portfolio, it fits within all. And there are lots of actions that fit within multiple portfolio areas, but we've tried to highlight the ones that are key to that specific portfolio area. And it should be recognised that we need collaboration across all of the service areas to deliver all of the actions. So specifically relating to this portfolio area and community safety and waste, it's safe to say that there are a lot of actions associated with community safety and waste. There's well over 20 actions attributed to this portfolio area. And although I've highlighted the ones for community safety in this particular table, there are plenty other ones that they will be involved in, and they are much further advanced in terms of a specific sustainability project brief and plan, and also subgroups that they've already established via community safety. So just very briefly then, an overview of their particular actions. Feasibility studies in terms of larger vehicles, looking at alternative fuels, for example. Looking at the equipment that they use and whether or not that actually can switch from diesel operated tools to battery operated tools or other types of mechanisms. Looking at generally a feasibility review in terms of vehicle replacement, and that's across the whole of HCC, but it's being led by community protection, and we already have a subgroup that's already been established to specifically look at fleet. And then also implementing advice through trading standards, for example, so that we're trying to, again, influence and inspire others by the work that we're doing. And then specifically relating to waste, there are a considerable amount of actions that can relate to waste and do relate to waste. And we will need to work with our district and borough colleagues to implement some of these. So just to highlight, we need to continue to promote the waste hierarchy, and that's through our functions as a waste planning authority and also waste disposal authority, and with our colleagues in terms of district and borough councils as waste collection authorities. Obviously, there's the waste management prevention agenda, and that's very important because it has lots of links to sustainability and climate change. And so we've got that action in there to represent the fact that that work is already in play. Increasing segregation of bulky items at recycling centres, for example, looking at other markets for recyclates through the recycling centres as well, and upcycling and looking at repair cafes and also the shops that are now hopefully being delivered across lots of our recycling centres. And then also there's a particular issue in terms of idling and the fact that cars are queuing to go into recycling centres, for example. We've already got webcams that are available, so we've got live capacity information for how people can access them more easily. But we're also looking at potentially some anti-idling campaigns specifically to recycling centres, and perhaps that would be some signage that we'd be able to implement. As I said, there's support needed by every portfolio for everybody else's portfolio, because this really is a holistic approach to climate change and sustainability. And there are lots of areas where community safety and waste can influence and be a part of lots of other actions. And these are just an example of the ones that I've pulled out from over 200 actions. Looking at travel plans generally, the carbon footprint of all of our service areas, looking at potential for biodiversity to be delivered on our own estate, looking at less waste to be produced, very much in terms of communication strategies and raising awareness, looking at opportunities for renewables, making sure we provide comments on planning applications where we're not the planning authority, but also have good planning applications where we are the planning authority and where we are asking for permission. Looking at climate change risk assessments, and also more generally, again, looking at electrification where we can in terms of our energy usage. Timeline for what's happening so far. As our chair said, we are taking this particular document through every single cabinet panel. This is the 3rd panel meeting, and I've got another one tomorrow, all the way through till December, with the view that we can then take on board all of the comments that we receive to present then to cabinet and county council for approval of the action plan, for us then as officers to start implementing it in full. In terms of recommendations, I won't go through these in detail because the report itself is quite specific in the list of recommendations, but just very, very briefly, it's about noting Appendix A to the action plan because it is a continuation of business as usual. Agreeing the quick wins that can be delivered within the next 1 to 5 years, if not before that, within existing budgets and resources, agree the works programmes, and then also agree future works programmes. So that's the end of my presentation. Hopefully that's given you a good run through of the document itself, and I would welcome any comments and questions from the panel.
Thank you, Julie, for that. Yes, I think you're being succinct as well with relating to these particular 2 portfolios. I have some hands up, I think, somewhere. Colin, your hand is up.
Yes, thank you, Chair, and thank you, Julie, for a very comprehensive but still succinct summary of this complex area. I looked at the reduction of waste area, page 8. I may have missed it because it's possibly somewhere else, but I noted the point about the ambition, item 4, to reduce promotional materials. I haven't noticed where we've mentioned the work already done, very much led by our chair, in terms of leading by example, the reduction of waste that was going on before we had the COVID restrictions and lockdown at County Hall, which was, I think, phenomenally successful and a great effort from the staff that supported it. And if I may just use the opportunity to make a supplementary point, you mentioned biodiversity. I'm personally concerned that the County Council has land set aside for technical reasons to meet government requirements to provide additional play space for schools. Basically, we have these left alone areas of play space in a number of schools that I'm aware of where there is actually no active biodiversity going on, but they're also certainly not used by the schools because they're actually too remote from the schools to actually be used as play space. It's merely a technical exercise. I think a waste. Thank you.
You make comments on that, Julie?
Yes, thank you. In terms of the leading by example work, excuse me, you're absolutely right. There was a lot of work that was going on before COVID, and myself and Terry, we sat on the leading by example group, and we are hoping to continue that work. It's slightly different now that we're not based in an office working environment, but what we would like to do through the new Sustainable Hertfordshire team is actually provide advice and guidance to councillors and also to staff about how they can make changes whilst they're working from home. So that work does still continue, definitely. In terms of recognition of that work, it is within the Sustainable Hertfordshire strategy itself. The strategy does give an overview of the work that we've already done too, and it does mention the leading by example work, for example, the increase in composting from the kitchenettes and stopping of disposable coffee cups, etc. So that work is recognised within the strategy, and I would hope that it is recognised in the business as usual section, which is contained within the appendix. But I will go back and double check that we've still got reference to leading by example. That's not a problem. In terms of HCC land and biodiversity, I think that's something that we definitely want to, or not even think, I know, that is something we definitely want to have conversations with our colleagues in property to talk about the whole of the HCC estate to make sure that it is being used as best as possible. In particular, in relation to biodiversity, there's some separate actions relating to highways and environment portfolio that talk about the need to identify a biodiversity baseline. And that's a biodiversity baseline for HCC land as well as the county as a whole. And that's work that we are pursuing through the Hertfordshire Climate Change and Sustainability Partnership to be able to provide a county-wide baseline. Once we have that baseline, we'll have a much better understanding of what it is we would like to achieve on certain parcels of land to improve their biodiversity. So we need to do that piece of work first, which is one of those enabling actions, and then we will have a better understanding of what we can seek to achieve. But discussions are ongoing with our colleagues in property and specifically relating to schools, as you mentioned.
Thank you for that reassurance.
Thank you.
John, you want to come in, John Howe?
Thank you, Chair. Few observations and a couple of questions. Thank you very much, Judy, for the presentation and for these documents, which are very illuminating. One small question on the tables at the back. I'm just looking at page 7, but it applies to most of it because it's to do with the columns. There are 2 columns headed up cost and potential estimated cost. I assume the first column, cost, is the cost of the climate change, i.e. the risk costs of the aspect we're trying to cover rather than the cost to implement the actions. But I got a bit confused by these cost columns.
John, could I just ask, is that, sorry, are you looking at the Appendix A?
Yes, sorry.
Yep.
I'm looking at, Appendix A, the report, and
Julie,
page 7 is a good example. Or page 13, any of those pages. Page 13, I'm looking at the moment.
Yeah, that's fine. So yes, I can answer that. So in terms of the cost, yes, it's the potential cost of actually implementing that action. But the potential estimated cost is the where we need to do scoping to be able to understand what that cost is going to be. So it's assumed to be high, and the brackets are given in terms of what high might mean, and where we need to do scoping to be able to understand the full implications of, for example, the cost of the data gathering may be different to the cost of the actual implementation of the action itself. So one of the costs might, so one of the actions might well say deliver a pilot scheme, for example. So the cost, excuse me, to deliver that specific action may well be high. But where it says that we need to deliver, undertake a baseline work, the cost of the cost column where it says it's high, medium or low is the cost related to the action that would then need to happen once we've undertaken that baseline work. And then the estimated cost is how much it would cost to undertake that baseline work. So we've got a cost associated with undertaking the investigation, which might be consultancy cost of £30,000–40,000. The cost of actually then implementing the action that they will hopefully identify as options for us may well be high, medium or low.
Okay, and the definition of high, medium and low is? That is
set out on page 3.
All right, okay.
Right, John, you want to continue with your questions?
Sorry, the other thing I think would be useful to be reminded of is what the governance framework around all this work is. Obviously, it must be substantial governance, because otherwise you wouldn't have been able to produce such a comprehensive document in the time frame that is in here. But I think that would be useful to have some clarity on that at future presentations, and how those time frames are being monitored and managed to make sure that things are delivered when it is anticipated.
Absolutely.
But it's a good start. Thank you.
Thank you.
Would you like me to come back on the governance question, Terry?
Yeah, please, before Simon comes in.
Yeah. So we do have existing governance arrangements in place in terms of the officer processes that we're going through. So the Sustainable Hertfordshire team itself was only formally created from the 1st of April onwards. But before that, we were making sure that I was the conduit in terms of work that came through. So we have the Sustainable Hertfordshire team in place. We also have a Sustainable Hertfordshire officer board, which has representatives from all of the service areas. And we also have the Sustainable Hertfordshire executive member group as well. And then in terms of the panels, we're going through every single panel, and that's in recognition of the fact that all of these subject areas cover every single panel. So we'll continue to do that. And the panel paper itself does suggest that we should have very regular monitoring and reporting back on the actions that are set out in this document. In fact, we've suggested quarterly. That's a very big ask, I have to say. We may well give an update of progress quarterly, but in terms of specific monitoring against every single action, that may well be more than quarterly. And we are working with our colleagues in the data team at the moment to come up with some key performance indicators, the intention being that we will have a dashboard of KPIs associated with the action plans too. We wanted to make sure we went through the panel process first before we defined all those KPIs, because we recognise that some of these actions may well be modified or amended through that particular panel process. So there are governance arrangements in place already, and we will be coming back to panels on a regular basis to give reports back.
Okay, thank you. I think it would be useful if those were reflected in the key action plan at some further iteration.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Simon, you raise your hand.
Yeah, Julie's effectively said it, but to be honest, it's in the gift of this panel to ask officers for specific community safety and waste actions when they want to reporting back. So, as Julie said, we can come back to you quarterly within the resources we've got. There might be a stretch to report specifically on this panel's actions. So the governance for your actions related to this panel sit very firmly with the panel.
Thank you. I would imagine that as we get to more and more things, I think we need to certainly be kept up to date.
Yeah.
And yes, I'm not terribly sure if 3 monthly is pushing it a bit. Perhaps 6 monthly is certainly 6 month minimum, but I think that's probably about right. As twice a year would be probably just as good, unless anything changes drastically.
Yeah, that's fine, Terry.
Tim, you got your hand up.
Thank you, Terry. Just I want to just make a comment about what's in our remit to a certain level. Of course, the household waste and recycling centres are within this panel's remit. And I'd like to think, even from the discussion earlier about the household waste recycling centres, now they've sort of Amy's come out of it and HCC are taking more control of it. I got the impression when I went down to them previously under Amy, that whilst they ticked the boxes, whilst they did do the recycling elements, I didn't think they were passionate about it. I'd like to think, in one sense, with HCC now in control of it, sort of thing, that there will be added benefits, added recycling, and if anything, I'd like to think some of the recycling could come up. So that's just a passing comment I was going to make. I've got a question for you, Terry. I appreciate you are very passionate about recycling and very passionate about the climate emergency and the sustainability message. But yeah, as a cabinet member, carbon neutrality by 2030, how confident are you at Herts County Council can achieve that internally?
It's a target, it's a goal. If you don't have targets, don't have goals, you're never going to get there. And so we have to set a target, and we as Cabinet will go out to officers and say, that is what we would like you to do. That's the direction of travel. Here's the policies around it. So it's policies, navigation, direction, and scrutiny of that. And that's what this panel is going to do, scrutinise how well we're doing on it, on all aspects, not just on carbon neutrality. But certainly the key to it is we've got to have a target, and it seems as though that target is doable. If it's not doable, then officers should turn around and say, no, you're talking through your hat, Cabinet. It is doable, and we're going to continue to aim for that target as a direction of travel and as a policy of the authority. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. Thank you very much, Terry.
Thank you. I come back to a point that you raised there around the household waste recycling centres. Now that we are running them, and the operatives there, who are normally quite diligent in many things, there may be opportunities, and I leave that in Simon's capable hands, or David, I guess, Dave Allen's capable hands, of how we can incentivise even, perhaps somewhere along the line, incentivise those operatives to be even more enthusiastic about recycling, reuse, reduce. And that may be something we look at in terms of when we move forward. We have a number of things to look at the household recycling centres, and one of them must be around how we can improve or reduce the volumes that go through there without it ending up somewhere else, like fly tipping. So it must be an opportunity if we can do that somewhere along the line. there's all sorts of things need reviewing as far as they're concerned, but that's a different matter. I'll throw another one in, Julie, for you here. Something which gets quoted regularly by me and by others is sending a truck 29 times around the globe every year. A 30-ton truck. Hertfordshire, or Simon, is sending a 30-ton truck around the planet 29 times a year to get the waste out of Hertfordshire, the waste that we produce out of Hertfordshire to other places, other counties around. That, to us, certainly, I'm sure everyone on this panel, is a contaminant which we can do without. Having a diesel, as it currently is, vehicle doing that, to us is an anathema. Now, we know why it's happening, because we didn't get the energy recovery facilities that we wanted, the two that we applied for, and that we were certainly, the second one, very confident we might get, unless somebody stepped in, and they did, which was a shame. But we've really got to do something different around sending that truck 29 times around the globe every year. But one of the options is rail rather than road, and because rail is electric in many cases. And so it's something which we are looking to move forward, and we're probably in communication with Grant Shapps, who's not only local but also responsible for transporting as a cabinet member, and see whether or not there's some things that we can do. We do have railway sidings. The classic, of course, was, there was one alongside the Energy for Waste facility we're looking at right house. But I think we have to give serious consideration how we move that waste around, and it's not just residual waste; it's also recyclable waste as well, because it putting it in the back of trucks and moving it 29 times on the planet is to everybody something which we can't support for over a period of time. So I'll come back on that many times. Rest assured. Please remember that. John, have you finished? You happy?
I just wanted to come back on your comment about reporting back and say I agree with the concept of every 6 months, but if we could have a no surprises type policy, so if something is happening in between whiles, it does get reported. We don't wait for the 6-month report.
Yeah, absolutely right. As I said, if things start going up or down, the same way as we said with the automatic fire alarms, if we start seeing hiccups, then I would expect to bring something back to this panel and say, hold on a minute here, something's happened, or hold on a minute here, the government's policy has changed, which means now we've got to do, it's not 2030, it is now 2025. I don't know. I'm not going to, that won't happen, but certainly those sorts of things may well influence us in coming back to the cabinet panel as and when, other than just every 6 months. Paul, you got your hand up.
Thanks, Terry. Without sounding to be facetious, in this new era, sort of post, well, we've moved on from the original discussions of unitary, and it sort of seems to be on the back burner for the moment. And you mentioning about vehicles going around Hertfordshire, adding to the carbon output. I would just like to reiterate the point that we, now is the time to look at the opportunity of a joint waste collection service across Hertfordshire. That would have so many benefits for all of us, tick so many boxes, and reduce the carbon output and footprint.
Thank you, Paul. Yes, I was particularly making reference to when we dispose of it as a waste disposal authority rather than a waste collection authority. But yes, and I know that battle around the Herts Waste Partnership to have a Herts Waste Authority has some support, but politically it doesn't have all the support of the Herts Waste Partnership. And I certainly know in the X number of years that I've been involved in it, we've tried to encourage in all sorts of ways with limited success. Some success, I might add, and people like Duncan Jones has been very enthusiastic, keen to make some progress around joint working and developing the sustainability around those joint working ways. But you and I know that some of them don't happen, and there's opportunities which get missed because, and this is sustainable opportunities that get missed because we work in silos. Those silos are called districts and boroughs, unfortunately, when it comes to waste collection and waste disposal. So and how it's collected and what's collected. But that's a discussion which the Heartspace Partnership has about every 4 months and will continue to have. Thank you. I've got no more hands up here. So the only comment I would make was, Julie, thank you very much indeed for all you've been saying here. Keep up the good work. I know you are unbelievably passionate about this. When we worked on set leading by example, it was something which the reason why officers felt you were the right person to run with this is because your commitment to sustainability, and we would commend and support all that you're doing and how you're doing it. So keep up the good work around it. We're keen for it to happen. When, how, what, it's forever. We're always going to be in the situation where we want to improve our sustainability. And if we don't, then we should pack up and go home. If we're not playing the game, not involved in the game, then don't come along to the game, I think is the answer to that, because we all want to do it, make it happen. So thank you, Julie, very much indeed for all you're doing. I think we are asked to note the report, aren't we?
There's several recommendations, Chair. Some of them are agreed.
Yeah, the recommendations via chat, if we can. The Cabinet panel are invited to consider and discuss, which we've done the content. The Cabinet panel asked to recommend to Cabinet, and the Cabinet, okay, etc., etc. Item number 7. It does go on. There are 7 recommendations there. Request officers update the most appropriate panel on progress in spring, which will be 6 months on, etc., etc. Yep. So can I ask you to go to chat, please, and vote for, against, or abstain? Yes, officer, I think we're about there. We've agreed it. Thank you, Michelle. So we now move on to item, I guess, number 8, which is, if you remember, colleagues, I asked that we hear regularly from the Fire and Rescue Service about where we stand as far as the inspection, which a Majesty's Inspector made some time ago, what progress we made. And similarly with item number 9, the Integrated Risk Management Plan. And normally, in the past, we've had verbal updates, we've had some formal, but because it's oh crikey, 7, 8 months, 9 months since we've met like this way in this sort of format. So that's why I've asked the Fire and Rescue Service to come back with written reports to us, telling us where we stand, and first and foremost on the Majesty's Inspector of Constabulary and Fire and Rescue Services, the action plan and the update. So, John, you going to take this?
Thank you, Terry. Good afternoon, panel. So the report, as Terry alluded to, is intended to brief a panel on the progress which has been made to date on the HMIC FRS action plan, last reported back in February, but it also makes reference to other engagement that we've had with the Inspectorate since then. I'll touch on that shortly. So back in February, we spoke to panel at a time when we were expecting a formal inspection in May, and that was reported to panel. Then, as it turned out, COVID has got in the way and interrupted those plans, and as such, the Inspectorate has suspended all formal inspections of that nature through until at least the early new year. I'll say a little bit more about that timetable towards the end of this report. In the meantime, though, the Inspectorate has turned its attention to the Fire Service's response to COVID in a commission direct from the Home Secretary. And the service took part in an inspection in September, one which all brigades up and down the country will have been subject to, which is due to conclude at the end of November. and we expect a report in January. The report will not be scoring individual services, but we expect that it will be giving an individual sort of pen portrait, as it was, on their findings. The inspection took place entirely remotely. We submitted a number of documents, and that was followed up by individual sessions, interviews on Teams, and indeed included executive member meeting virtually with Zoe Bellingham, the lead inspector for HMI CFRS for the fire service. Feedback from that anecdotally has been positive, but we await with expectation the formal report in January. In respect of the action plan, I'll touch on that now. Again, the impact of COVID has been seen in some areas of those outstanding actions. Most obviously, as we might hear a little bit later from the DEP in respect of the fire cover review, but also on some of our technology based initiatives where that has slowed things down a little. In respect of the other recommendations, however, we continue to make steady progress. I think there will be some recommendations there which by their very nature are always going to be regarded by the services as work in progress, things like collaboration, for example, efforts around equalities, diversity and inclusion, as we embark on a number of initiatives to recruit from across Hertfordshire and have a more representative workforce. Good progress has been made on that in the recent intakes in recruits, and the feedback from the latest recruitment campaign has also been encouraging. In particular note, I think, in terms of progress would be some of those areas we've made around providing a transparent progression platform, a framework for progression within the service, and we've had good cooperation from rep bodies in introducing new arrangements to provide transparency around selection, but also to set out clearer career paths for all members of staff within the directorate. Happy to take any particular questions that colleagues, members might have.
Thanks for that, Greg. John, let's see. Hands up. Right, let me have a see what I've got on here. Yeah, we noticed some of the technology. The retendering exercise undertaken in the new year to source new management information systems to manage referrals, interventions, and breach prevention activity. And that's, as you say, on red. The technology, I guess, is being held up by COVID, is it?
Yeah, just to clarify, when we reported in February, that was a red. We'd been out on a tender exercise which had been unsuccessful. However, since then, we've repeated that tender exercise and now have procured a system which we're in the process of implementing and which we expect to go live early in the new year. So that is, you know, from a position of an area where actually we were. In the meantime, we have paper-based systems to help support our safe and well visits. It's fair to say, though, that those arrangements are a little bit clunky, and the new CFRMIS product is expected to make life considerably better for all concerned. So, yeah, a positive step forward in terms of that particular recommendation.
Well, we also mentioned the mobile data terminals issues as well, which is somewhat behind schedule, isn't it? Yeah.
Yes, it is, and that remains the subject of considerable attention. One of the areas also flagged up from HMI in respect of the challenge of a number of major IT projects and a limited resource within our own IT teams to support those various projects. Good news is that with Vision 4 now online across all 4 constituents in the consortium and a much more settled system, we've got more capacity now to progress some of those IT projects. The MDT risk project is one of those, and we are on track to have that go live in the service early in the new year. It's currently being trialed, but again, some of those trials that we would expect to have progressed by now, using operational crews going out to premises where we would have risk information, has slowed down because of COVID and limitations that's put on in restricting activity from operational crews.
Thank you. John, you want to come in?
Thank you, Terry. I think John's response to your earlier question has covered most of what I was going to ask about, because I was concerned about the IT and especially the risk around the service should ensure its firefighters have good access to relevant and up-to-date risk information. But it sounds as if that is being addressed as far as possible.
It is, and just to reiterate, operational crews do have now access to those risk that risk information. The new system is one that is going to deliver us a more dynamic web-based environment, which is going to be much more responsive to updates rather than the sort of more clunkier arrangements that we have at present. But I do need to reassure all members that operational crews have access to that risk information already on their MDTs. This is an upgrade of the software which will introduce additional capability.
Okay, thank you, John.
Okay, are we all, no more questions coming forward, I see. No more hands up. So I guess we're content with that, and I think we're asked to note the report, are we not? Yes, Cabinet Power is asked to note the content of the action plan and report with comments and observations. I think we need you to come back in 6 months' time, John, as a minimum.
Indeed. Okay.
In writing in 6 months' time, and if necessary, whenever the next Cabinet panel is, which will be before 6 months' time, but certainly if we do then, we may well ask for a verbal as well, but certainly a written report, I think it has to happen in the 6 month period. And if we think things are slipping or things aren't making the progress we should, then we may ask for a written report in 3 months' time, but certainly in 6 months' time, if you can make sure that happens, please.
Indeed, Terry noted. In fact, we couldn't rule out the possibility that within 6 months we do have a formal inspection from HMI. Their intention, we understand, is to start up that process early in the new year, obviously subject to where COVID might lead us. We aren't expected to be in the very first run of inspections, but it may well be the case we're not far behind. So certainly within 6 months we can return to panel with an updated report.
Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
So after a managing inspector, I guess we move on to the integrated risk management plan. And Chris, you can take this one?
Yes, please, Chair. Thank you.
Again, similar principles as before, when we said about a managing inspector, we will look for written reports minimum every 6 months unless things are going differently, but a verbal in between if we can. So on that basis, that's why we're asking for this report. Over to you, Chris.
Thank you, Chair. So the paper will walk you through we've got good intelligence, good forethought for the challenges that the service will face. And so we've done that across prevention, protection and training. Those are areas of further investment that we are required to commit to. And an example of that would be when we think about things like the terrible Grenfell Tower incident and some of the legislative and organisational changes that will come from that experience for UK fire and rescue and the construction industry. And so phase one is around understanding the pressures and need to invest, and we have created a structure now to support the existing arrangements under IP and annual planning to ensure that we meet the challenges of those areas of the business moving forward. That's now owned by a group of officers within the organisation and reports on a quarterly basis. And so from that, we can determine those areas that we need to ensure that we resource effectively, and that then goes into our extant planning processes. So phase one is complete and is now business as usual. Phase two is very much around, and members will remember we published the station profiles when we published the integrated risk management plan, which is a declaration of the operational activity that the organisation deals with across each of those locations. And that allows us to plan and prepare for our operational emergency response, as well as dealing with how we would engage with protection and prevention activity to reduce the risk whilst responding to the remaining risk. And so phase two is very much around ensuring that our resources are in the right place based on Hertfordshire growth, new industries, changing processes, because that's a live assessment of risk and must be at the forefront of how we organise and brigade ourselves, in effect. So phase two includes the continuous refresh and review of risk and infrastructure and growth, as well as demography. And alongside that, members will be aware that involves the trials of both the rapid intervention and the intermediate intervention or response vehicles. So that's the smaller, more agile, rapid response vehicle, and then the intermediate vehicle, which is not the same size and weight as a standard fire appliance, but has the majority of the capability, and that's more around us being able to access the rurality away from the fast road network without losing pace, to ensure we provide an excellent service. And so those two trials have been delayed, as the report states, and that's really down to supply chain issues and the ability to have internal staff concentrate on that, when quite understandably and rightly the Directorate and the Fire Service have retasked some of our people to supporting the Hertfordshire response to COVID. And so that phase two piece, and you'll see in the diagram in the appendices, it is continuing as we speak. My hope is that we'll be able to get into the trials formally early in 2021. But of course, this is all pivoting on the need to respond to the health emergency and supporting colleagues across the County Council and the districts, as well as being able to access supply chain to get the fleet in for us to do the physical trial. But I'm content and I'm happy to report that officers have done significant work around all aspects of preparatory work, from the risk modelling to the risk assessments to ways of working to support that trial. So phase two is very much around a continuous response and assessment of risk and the two vehicle trials. That will then lead us into phase three, and whilst we will take some operational firefighters from their current positions to redeploy them to Watford to support the trial of the rapid vehicle, we won't move to reduce firefighter numbers to 4 at every location until we have completed the risk analysis and the fire cover review as contained within phase two, because it's absolutely appropriate and proper that we should move colleagues that we need to move to allow those trials to be conducted. But the organisation do not want to have a knee-jerk reaction or move colleagues until we understand where we actually need them to give us the best coverage, as well as the ability to improve the things that we need to prove and take the maximum from the resource plan that we have. So phase 3 is very much around delivering on the promise that we made to you based on the evidence that we presented in previous panels and up through Cabinet, and then considering shift patterns and other aspects of how we would organise our people in the most efficient and effective way. So they're the three phases that we're currently engaged in. 1 is complete and business as usual. 2 is an ongoing process, and you can see through the documentation that we are moving through that now, subject to COVID. And as we start to see information come from the trials, we'll then move into substantively delivering phase 3, but we will take some of those staffing moves to help us deliver some of the trials, because as you know, as agreed through this process, we would bring on the rapid vehicle in addition to the resources that we currently have in Watford, and therefore I need to move firefighters to facilitate the ability to do that trial. And that, Chair, I think is the report.
Thank you, Chris. I have a few questions. If nobody else comes in. Before I do, 4.6.4, I'm not terribly sure I understood the wording of that. Other areas of investment will not be addressed until such time as other phases of the integrated plan have been implemented, which in turn release investment that is currently committed. What does that mean in English?
Yeah, apologies.
That's right. It's me, my interpretation, perhaps everybody else understands it.
No, that's fine. I'll put myself on a plain English course after this. So it is that point around we want to be cautious and ensure that we're doing the right things in the right order. So it would be sensible for the organisation to consider the fire cover and the risk cover data as to whether we have 5 on a particular fire engine, 4 on a particular fire engine, 3 on a rapid vehicle, how we manage our specials. All of that is encompassed in the work that we're currently doing. And so once we understand the data from that, because of course, if we run the trials and it tells us one thing, that will change our planning assumptions for ridership. And if it tells us something different, if we've already made a move to change ridership numbers, change numbers of firefighters at different locations, I don't want to be in a position where we as the service are moving back to or creating another step change in our operational firefighter cover. It's important that we do it once and we do it well.
Okay, thank you. That's one thing. There's one other thing. I'll find it. Yeah, in the integrated risk management plan, has COVID changed anything? Not our progress in implementing the integrated management plan, but in what we had in the integrated risk management plan. I'll give the example of that now we're working a lot more from home, and I'm working from home, and that's an example for people like us. Yeah? Is anything that's happened as a result of COVID that has will influence our integrated risk management plan in the future, and the way in which it is written and the way it is today?
Yes, is the straight answer, Chair, and I think the picture is still revealing itself. So I think just by way of a couple of examples. So in terms of vulnerability data and understanding our risk, I think the close working across all of the districts and county and agencies under the LRF, the Local Resilience Forum, has brought together our ability to have a rich data picture to ensure that we're delivering really incisive action to support individuals and families and businesses. So I think COVID has accelerated our ability to access and interpret and then action data. So I think that's a huge step forward, actually. And then in terms of how we engage with people, certainly this medium is changing how we can access people in the home and how we can support businesses and how we can be more productive without travel time and other bits and pieces. It's everything from having appointments from protection officers to doing a school visit via whatever the platform needs to be, Zoom, etc., etc. So I think there's a huge amount of pause for reflection and how we can take the learning from this process, and that will continue. I think there's more to learn.
Okay, thank you. John, do you want to come in?
Just briefly, Terry, to say it's useful to have the reports, etc. And we had discussed by email the Hertfordshire Emergency Services Collaboration Board, and I wondered when you wish to bring that up.
Good opportunity now. I think, yes, John, I've got a note of it here. While we have officers with us, yeah, there's a meeting tomorrow, I think is the answer. But do you want to make any comment, Chris, around where we stand with the Collaboration Board?
I think things are progressing well. Previous speakers had noted things such as the move to the Stanborough site for the leadership team. So myself and the Chief Officer that is our base location now. We are in the process of moving the rest of the leadership team onto the site, which will advance collaboration, I'm expecting, at pace. I think the work around our training environment, so JESA up in Longfield, I think that's hugely important. And again, that will be on the agenda for tomorrow's meeting, to try and take every opportunity to ensure that officers are able to work collaboratively in the spirit of the Joint Emergency Services principles. It's all about co-location, it's all about co-creation and understanding how we can help problem solve collectively. And I think that is, the JESA model and our shared ambition for a shared headquarters will assist and will advance that work at pace. So lots of strategic asset conversations, lots of co-location, lots of opportunities for reducing cost across the public estate, but delivering really good operational frontline services, and thinking about high level and tactical problem solving together. So there's some of the highlights, and of course we've talked in the past about shared protocols for searching for missing persons. We're in the process of procuring a new drone, which will help in both missing persons and many other operational taskings. There's a huge piece of work going on around how we can simplify training, so actually we can share that training provision in terms of learning together. So it's across operations, training, prevention. PCC talked this morning, didn't he, about prevention first, learning from fire, us sharing our experiences, and ultimately helping the residents and citizens in the most expedient way.
Thank you for that.
Thank you.
I know one thing that's not been sorted out, John, is the funding at the moment. We're still talking money between us and the Police and Crime Commissioner as to where the arrangements are as far as both the headquarters and also as far as the training academy is concerned, JESA is concerned. So I know those things are in the melting pot and will have to be sorted out before we get around to our IPP. Yeah? So we know where we stand as far as money is concerned. But I know that's one of the things which will get discussed very, very soon. In the same way as Chris mentions, it's on the things that are on the agenda tomorrow for meetings, which I have to say we haven't had one for a while, but for obvious reasons. So happy, John?
Content.
Okay.
Thank you.
That's an expression which I tend to use a lot as well. I am content. Good. Thank you. Thanks for that, Chris, as well, that update. As I said, 6 months' time, unless anything drastic happens, we'll again expect you to coming on that. I think we have one more paper before us, which is a progress report on on-call firefighter project, a part of the integrated risk management plan. So it's a continuation, really. Chris, again.
This is actually Rad, I think, if Rad's online. If not, I'll pick it up.
Yeah, I'm here, everybody. Afternoon. My name's Rad Bristow. I'm the District Commander for Hartsmere Welling Hatfield in Fire and Rescue, and I also manage the on-call firefighter project that's part of the Integrated Risk Management Plan. So the aim of the on-call firefighting project is to make our on-call fire stations and fire crews more efficient and effective. And they make up almost half of our response units in fire and rescue. So I'm just going to give you a brief update on the 5 strands that we are concentrating on to try and increase our on-call availability. Firstly, technology, recruitment changes and training, flexible mobilising, contracts, and then I'll finish off with employer-supported firefighting. So I'll just go through those one at a time, and I'll take any questions at the end. So we've made a concerted effort in terms of technology. On-call firefighters are mobilised via what we call an alerter. We've recently upgraded those alerters to make them a bit more future-proof and to integrate them into an availability system so that we will have better reliability and accuracy on the availability of our on-call fire crews. We've also instigated some recruitment changes to make it easier for people to attend recruitment sessions. So instead of doing those centrally, we've put in a new technology so that people can take the written tests at fire stations at their convenience, which just takes away a barrier to people becoming on-call firefighters. Also gives potential recruits a bit more flexibility. And in addition to that, what we've done is we've looked at how many people are leaving the on-call fire service over the course of a year, and we've put on an additional training course for the next 3 years to address shortfalls in the on-call establishment, to try and bring us up to the level where we've got more availability, especially during the daytime. And I'll come on to talk about that in a few minutes when we talk about contracts and employer-supported firefighting. And about this time last year, we introduced something called flexible mobilising, which is where when we've got periods of high demand, so for example, during floods across the county, something we call spate conditions, or if we've got a large incident in one part of the county and we need to ensure that we provide cover in other parts of the county to meet our attendance times, what we do is we've started to bring together on-call stations that are deficient in a crew during the daytime to make a full crew, so that rather than working on a station-based numbers basis, we're working on the number of firefighters that we've got available across the county. And we've used technology to implement that, something called Text Anywhere. That's subsequently been used on over 40 occasions across the county, where it's provided resilience to all of our communities. We also use that for relief crews and for standby moves. We don't use it for the initial emergency response because it would take too long to bring the crews together. 2 months ago, we introduced new contracts for on-call firefighters, which are within the existing terms and conditions. But what that does is it gives us the opportunity to recruit people from outside the normal on-call firefighter catchment area. So when I spoke about the on-call alerters, traditionally on-call firefighters have had 4 minutes to get to their local station and respond. Well, with the new contracts, it gives us the opportunity to recruit people from outside that 4-minute catchment area if they can work flexibly at fire stations. So that links into employer-supported firefighting, which is where we ask big employers to support on-call firefighters during their training and to release them during the working day. Now, this is really important for us because obviously as Fire and Rescue Service, we are part of the wider HCC. So we've got 8,000 employees in HCC, and I just think it was important that we try to tap into that. And SMB, Senior Management Board of HCC, have undertaken to support Fire and Rescue Service in our recruitment and our mobilisation after they're fully trained of on-call firefighters, which, considering the smart working strategy and what we now call flexible working, especially post-COVID, it gives us the opportunity to have people who work outside of the normal turnout area becoming on-call firefighters, but using the fire station to work during their working day and providing the stop for that gap in fire cover that we've had during the daytime over the past few years. So that's really my brief update complete, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay, so thank you for that. We seem to have an echo. No, we've gone there. Thank you for that. The question for me is, employer support firefighters. Yes, we've gone to HCC. Have we gone to the districts and boroughs and asked them whether or not they're up for this?
We haven't done that yet, but I think that's a great idea. What we plan to do with employer supported firefighting is do it in 3 phases. And the first phase was looking at CP, so our directorate, anybody who was able to work remotely at a fire station but was already a fully trained firefighter. So that piece of work is done. Phase 2 is going out to the wider HCC, and we've got support from HCC to do that. And I fully expect in phase 3 that we will go to district councils, and that will probably be our first port of call, considering the partnerships that we've got, to try and explain to them what the on-call firefighter role is and the benefits that it will bring to their organisations as well as ours.
Okay, thank you. I know that certainly districts and boroughs, like other businesses, do allow their employees to do a number of things, like be councillors, for example, give them time off during the day to attend council meetings. And similarly for magistrates, if they are qualified magistrates, businesses do allow in community activities, if you like, or community responsibilities. So that's always a good thing. And firefighting may be one that I know we encourage it anyway, but the districts and boroughs may well want to be seen to be involved in it. Certainly the members of districts and boroughs, I'm sure, will be very enthusiastic about us asking for that sort of participation by the officers. So, looking for questions. No other questions, comments coming through? Nobody's got their hands up for us anyway. So I guess you're all content with that, with the progress we're making on it. Keep it up, Brad, if you can, and keep us informed. I think, again, 6 months' time, we may well want some form of report of where you stand, whether it be a verbal or whether it be a written one, but certainly keep us in the loop, I think the answer is, because the members here are keenly enthusiastic to be kept up to date on what's happening. Yes, people like Colin and I get briefings from your leadership team, but I think it's very, very important that the Cabinet panel also learn what we learn and know what we know as far as I use you as an example, fire and rescue, and particularly the on-call firefighter project is concerned. So thank you for that. On that basis, I think with this one here, again, it is just one to note. The recommendation, the Cabinet panel is asked to note the contents of the paper and provide comments and feedback. Well, I've provided some, not enthusiasm from others. So on that basis, have we noted the report? I think we have. And I think that concludes the meeting for today. As I said, I'm sorry it's running longer than normal, but we expected that because of sustainability and because we knew that the agenda was a bit longer than normal because we'd asked for some reports to come to us. So thank you for your time and energies. Do appreciate it, and officers as well. And have a nice rest of the day if you can. And we will talk again soon, no doubt. So thank you and goodbye.
Thanks very much, Terry. Well done.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, everyone.
Thank Thank you, Terry.